The lobby of
Sir, we need
Hargrove
those documents
Financial
now.
on Michigan Avenue in
Fine, here they
Chicago
are.
was the kind of
We'll be in touch.
space that had been designed to communicate power quietly. 40 feet of Italian marble, floor-to-ceiling glass, the particular hush of a building that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year. On a Thursday morning in March, that hush was broken. 2 officers came through the front doors at 9:17. They were not running. People who know what they are doing and have the weight of paperwork behind them do not need to run. They walked to the security desk, showed credentials, and were directed to the 11th floor. Marcus Webb was at his desk on the 11th floor when they came through the glass doors of the analytics division. He was 31 years old, senior financial analyst. 8 years with the company. The last 3 in this role. The last one spent quietly building a body of work he had believed in completely. He was also a single father to a 4-year-old boy named Isaiah, who had been dropped at daycare 40 minutes ago, and who had waved goodbye from the window with the whole body. Enthusiasm of a child who does not yet know that some mornings are the last ordinary morning for a very long time. The officers stopped at his desk. The entire open plan floor went silent in the way that open plan floors go silent, not all at once, but in a spreading wave from the point of disruption, each person's awareness arriving a half-second after the last. Marcus Webb, one of the officers, said, "You are under arrest for financial fraud and securities manipulation." Marcus stood up slowly. He was the kind of man who, under pressure, became very still rather than very loud. And he was still now in a way that was almost frightening to watch the stillness of someone who has just understood something enormous and is processing it at a speed that does not leave room for reaction. He said, "There has been a mistake," the officer said. "Sir, please turn around." He turned around. The handcuffs went on. And from the glass-walled corner office at the end of the floor, the office that belonged to CEO Diana Keller, which had a direct sight line to every desk in the analytics division, a blonde woman in a black dress stood with one hand pressed against the glass and watched. She did not look away. She did not send anyone to stop it. She pressed a tissue to her lips and watched Marcus Webb be walked through his own office in handcuffs. And her face held the expression of a woman who has made a decision she knows is wrong and has decided to live with it anyway. Marcus turned once, at the glass doors, looked directly at her. She looked back, then the doors opened and he was gone. What Diana Keller had done, the full story, the real one, not the one that went into the court record, was this. 18 months before Marcus' arrest, Diana Keller had authorized a series of internal transfers that had restructured a significant portion of the company's client investment portfolio in ways that were not, technically, fraudulent but were, demonstrably, in violation of 3 separate compliance protocols that existed precisely to prevent the appearance of the thing she had done. She had done it under pressure. The board had been watching quarterly numbers with the specific attention of people who were preparing to make a change, and Diana Keller had been CEO for 4 years, and had spent 3 of them building something genuinely good, and 1 of them watching it begin to erode, and she had made a decision in a single afternoon that she had spent the subsequent 16 months trying to paper over. Marcus had found it. Not by looking for it, he had been working on a routine compliance audit that was his actual job, and the irregularities had surfaced because that was what irregularities did when someone competent was looking at the numbers. He had brought it to her privately. That was who Marcus Webb was, a man who believed in process and in giving people the opportunity to correct their own mistakes before those mistakes became public. He had laid out what he had found, clearly and without accusation, and asked how she would like to proceed. She had thanked him. She had said she would handle it. She had asked for 72 hours. In those 72 hours, Diana Keller had called her attorney, restructured the paper trail in the only direction that was still available to her, and ensured that the irregularities, when they were reported, and she made sure they were reported, by an anonymous tip to the SEC that she sent from a phone that could not be traced to her, pointed to the analyst who had found them rather than the executive who had created them. She had told herself several things during those 72 hours. She had told herself that Marcus was young and would recover, that the evidence was genuinely ambiguous and a good lawyer could navigate it, that her company employed 400 people whose livelihoods depended on its stability, and bought the utilitarian calculus of one career against 400 was not as simple as it appeared. She had told herself these things with the focused efficiency of a woman who was very good at constructing arguments and who had, in this instance, used that skill entirely in the service of self-preservation. Marcus Webb was convicted 18 months later. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. He was sentenced to 8 years and served 6 with good behavior. He was 32 when he went in. Isaiah was 4 years old. Isaiah's grandmother, Marcus's mother, Diane Webb, who had raised Marcus alone and who had spent 40 years building the kind of quiet, fierce faith in her that does not break under ordinary pressure, took Isaiah in and raised him and told him every single day that his father was a good man who had been treated wrongly, and that the world would eventually reflect that. She said it every day for 6 years. She was not wrong. What 6 years built prison had not broken Marcus Webb. This was not because Marcus Webb was invulnerable. It was because he had gone in with something that the system was not designed to accommodate: a mathematical mind, a specific injustice with a specific paper trail, and 6 years of uninterrupted time to build a case that he could not have built on the outside, because on the outside he had a job and a 4-year-old and a life that consumed every hour. He had requested his own trial records on his 3rd day of incarceration. He had read them with the attention of a man who understood exactly what he was looking at. He had begun writing letters to legal aid organizations, to a law professor at Northwestern whose published work on financial fraud he had read in his first year of college, to a journalist at the Chicago Tribune who had covered white-collar crime for 20 years, and who had, on his 4th letter, written back. The journalist's name was Paul Reyes. He was 54, skeptical in the professional way that good journalists are skeptical. And he had read Marcus' 4th letter 3 times before he picked up the phone. What followed took 4 years. It was not dramatic in the way that television made these things dramatic. It was slow and procedural and required the specific patience of people who understand that the truth does not move quickly but does move, if you stay behind it long enough and push in the right direction. Paul Reyes found 2 former Hargrove Financial employees who had seen things in the months before Marcus' arrest that they had not fully understood at the time and had not been asked about at trial. He found a forensic accountant willing to re-examine the original evidence. He found, buried in a server backup that Hargrove Financial's IT department had retained as a matter of routine procedure, and never thought to consider relevant, 17 minutes of internal communication metadata that placed Diana Keller's executive access on specific files at specific times that were entirely inconsistent with her trial testimony. The story ran on a Sunday in September. It was 4,000 words. By Monday morning it had been read by a federal prosecutor whose office had been quietly interested in Diana Keller, for reasons unrelated to Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb walked out of a correctional facility in downstate Illinois on a Tuesday. In October, with his mother on one side and his 10-year-old son Isaiah on the other. Isaiah had his father's face and his grandmother's stubbornness, and he held his father's hand. The entire drive back to Chicago without letting go, and did not say much, which was the Webb family way of saying everything. What Isaiah had kept, his mother had kept the apartment. This was the first thing Marcus noticed, not the size of it, not the condition, but the fact of it. She had kept the lease on the apartment he had lived in when Isaiah was born, the one he had been paying for on an analyst's salary. Through 6 years of a fixed prison income supplemented by what his mother could manage, because she had decided that Marcus Webb was coming home to his own home, and not to someone else's guest room. She had kept his books, his records. A photograph on the kitchen counter of Marcus and Isaiah at a park, taken 3 weeks before the arrest. Isaiah at 4 years old with his father's hand completely swallowing his small one. Isaiah, at 10, showed his father his room. He had a shelf of books, the kind of 10-year-old who read seriously, which did not surprise Marcus at all. He had a notebook on his desk that he said was for math problems he found interesting, which surprised Marcus not even slightly. He had, on the wall beside his bed, a printed copy of the newspaper article Paul Reyes had written. It had been there since the day his grandmother printed it. Some of it was beyond his reading level when she put it up. He had grown into it. "Dad," Isaiah said that first night, with the directness of a child who had been raised by a woman who did not believe in circling around things. Marcus looked at him. "Were you scared?" Isaiah asked. "In there." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "In the beginning." He looked at his son. "Then I found something to do with the time, And I thought about you every day, and thinking about you made me less scared. Isaiah considered this with the seriousness of a 10-year-old processing something important. Grandma said you were going to fix it, he said. Grandma was right, Marcus said. Isaiah nodded slowly. She usually is. Marcus laughed, the first real laugh in a long time, in his own apartment, with his son on the bed beside him. And it felt like something returning to its correct position after years of being slightly wrong.